Well, good evening. Thank you so much for inviting us. I'm Sandra Lundt, and you are going to get a brief summary of an all-day tour that we do in the Upper Poudre Canyon. So the tour we do starts at 9:15 in the mornings, and we hit 11 different historic sites in about a 10-mile range. And we do, we try to do no more than 6 a summer, but this summer we're doing 9. So the presentation you're going to get tonight is just kind of a short version of a lot of the sites that we see on this tour. And just so you know, the tour, if you are interested in doing the tour, we'll pass around a sign-up sheet. We don't have any spaces left for this summer, but the tour you would be on a waiting list for next summer. It is $50. You bring a sack lunch. You drive to each site, and it's a great day. It ends about 3:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon up at the Kinnickinnick Ranch. And the money for the tour goes to benefit an entity called Old Poudre City, Inc., which is a board that Sue and I are both on, and the money goes to help preserve the history in the Upper Poudre Canyon. So I'm sure all of you are well aware of Poudre Canyon. You know where Poudre Canyon is? You've all been on hiking tours at some point up the Poudre Canyon. Well, this is a picture of Arrowhead Lodge, and this is where I was born and raised. My mom and dad operated Arrowhead Lodge for 40 years, and this is home for me. And I'm going to give you a little bit of history of the lodge as we proceed forward.
As she mentioned, I also was born in Fort Collins, also 5th generation Coloradoan. My parents were teachers, so we were really lucky, and we got all our summers off. And where we spent our summers was up the Poudre Canyon at our home, which was called Pinehurst. Every summer holiday, we were up there. We were involved in 4-H. We were involved in all the community activities. And again, just like Arrowhead was home for her, this was home to me. Sandy and I like to joke that we were friends before we were. Our mothers were pregnant at the same time with us, and there's about 2 months difference in us. I'm older and wiser, and she's younger.
Yeah, there you go.
But here we are by my back gate. I think you can tell which is which. When we were about 10 years old, and then just a few years later up by Barnes Meadow Reservoir. Having had a unique and rewarding childhood in this amazing community of the Upper Poudre Canyon, we really consider ourselves extremely lucky.
So the Poudre River has such significance, clear back to way before the settlers. The Poudre River was a source of water. Well, actually, it goes back to the days of the trappers, where the river was significant for the trapping. It then became very significant for the tie hackers. And you'll hear a little bit more about the tie hackers today. Then it was very significant for the pioneers, as it was not only their source of drinking water, but it was their source of ice. And then as the tourist season opened up, then the river became very important for the fly fishing industry and the fishing industry and the calling of tourists to come to the Poudre River. My father in his book writes that from its source in the high country of the Rocky Mountain National Park, the Poudre River flows through 24 miles of true wilderness, moving in sections through the water-broken grotto falls. Next comes a narrow canyon area containing the picturesque Poudre Falls. Below that, the river wanders through 19 miles of the flat bottom valley, land prized by the early pioneers for their homesteads. Then it winds through a series of V-shaped canyons and into two gorges called the Big and Little Narrows, which are the river's most interesting scenic points. It is a unique and beautiful body of water flowing through 24,360 acres of mountainous country that is only 11% privately owned. So as my father states, he certainly feels that it was truly worth the designation and protection of being titled wild and scenic.
So drawn by the river, the original inhabitants were Paleo-Indian nomadic hunters and gatherers who go back more than 10,000 years. A burial site dating back at least that far was unearthed near Hewlett Gulch, which is by Poudre Park. You may all be familiar. You guys have probably all hiked Hewlett Gulch, right? Anyway, they found a burial site there in 1963 when the Forest Service was doing some soil conservation work. And they named her Gordon Creek Woman. She is one of the oldest skeletons unearthed in Northern America, which we knew nothing about until about 5 years ago. The Paleo-Indian groups eventually formed into distinct tribes, including the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Utes. Next came the trappers looking for beaver. They were responsible for naming the river the Cache la Poudre. The trappers were followed by the loggers and tie hackers, who used the river to transport the logs, and then came the miners, homesteaders, and resort owners who promoted the river for its fine fishing. Originally, the only way to reach the Upper Poudre Canyon was through Livermore and down a steep trail that ended at what is now known as Rustic or the nearby Glen Echo. So there was no road through the canyon. It is believed that this trail was known as the Warriors Trail by the Arapaho. The descent was widened and improved through the years, but in 1879, a gentleman from Fort Collins named S.P. Stewart and two other Fort Collins businessmen formed the Cache la Poudre and North Park Toll Road Company to build a road that could accommodate wagon traffic from the foot of Pingree Hill, which we now call Soul Hill, to North Park. That's a pretty grainy picture, isn't it? They had reached the Chambers Lake with the toll road improvements when silver mining excitement broke out in North Park, and they were able to complete the road with one fork servicing Gould and Teller City in North Park and the other to Lulu City, which is now in Rocky Mountain National Park. It is believed that this cabin was the original toll booth for the Stewart Toll Road. This is across the street from the rustic neon sign as you're driving up right before Glen Echo. So this little cabin, which is privately owned now, was believed to have been the toll booth, original toll booth. The toll was $2 for each vehicle drawn by a horse, mule, or oxen, 40 cents a head for loose stock, and 20 cents a head for sheep. The toll was dropped in 1902 when the road became public. And it wasn't until 1920 that the road up the canyon was completed. So again, the only way you could get to the Upper Poudre Canyon was through Livermore. Meanwhile, S.B. Stewart, who was building and working on the toll road, built the Rustic Hotel to service the toll road traffic. Unfortunately, Stewart was overextended and he lost the hotel through tax sales within 5 years. This happened a lot up there. I'm always kind of amazed how often people lost things. What followed was 90 years of numerous owners, grand ambitions, foreclosures, deaths, tax sales, and transfers. In the late 40s, the owners removed interior walls to make it more lodge-like. Unfortunately, those walls were weight-bearing, and it was ultimately condemned in 1969 and then demolished in 1978.
John Zimmerman. John Zimmerman arrived in the Poudre Canyon in the summer of 1881. John arrived with his brother and his wife and 4 children Edward 8:14, Casper 12, Ada 10, and Aggie was almost a year. Well, they arrived the summer of 1881, and John Zimmerman's first homestead, does anybody recognize this peak?
No-Coup Crags.
No-Coup Crags. They arrived, and their first homestead was up close to the No-Coup Crags because John Zimmerman was from Switzerland, and that mountain reminded him of home. Well, the homestead was approximately where the pullout is to go to Zimmerman Lake, named after the Zimmermans, and I'm sure many of you have hiked up to the Zimmerman Lake. Well, that first winter was quite hard. I think they had a herd of about 12 cattle, and almost all of them did not make it through that first winter. So they decided to move down canyon. And their second homestead was near where Laramie Lake is. Well, that next winter wasn't much better. So they moved down to their third homestead, and this is a picture of it, and actually it was one of the first hotels in the canyon. And that picture is about a mile and a half below the fish hatchery up the Poudre Canyon. So that was John Zimmerman's third homestead. Well, in the midst of all of this, John Zimmerman was a miner, a frustrated miner that had been mining all the way across the country and was really hoping to get to California, but ended up stopping off in the Poudre Canyon. And in the midst of all of this, he struck. No, he didn't strike gold. Well, maybe kind of. No, he posted claim. I didn't get the wrong word. He and his brother put a claim on a mine that was down close to where the Poudre Canyon Chapel and community building and fire station are. It's across the river, and if you know where you're looking, you can see the little road that was etched out up to the Elkhorn mine, which was John Zimmerman and his brother's mine. Well, the little town of Poudre City, which was established in 1890, became so, and John Zimmerman had the same problem that all of the miners had from Manhattan, and that was that it was very costly to process the gold ore. And so the little town of Poudre City came into being. In the middle of it was a stamp mill, which processed the gold ore and refined it to the point that it was pretty, you could refine it there and take it to town then to have it tested. Well, John Zimmerman in 1890, just a minute. Wait, I gotta get it all. Anyway, the stamp mill was fired up in 1890, and John Zimmerman tested his gold that he had mined out of the mine, and lo and behold, it came out pretty good. And so he decided he would sell the stamp mill and the mine to a company in Nevada.
St. Louis.
Oh, St. Louis, thank you very much.
It's close.
And close, that's right. And lo and behold, a little bit after all of that happened, in 1891, the sale went through in the early year of 1891, and then June 10th of 1891, the Chambers Lake Dam broke, and it came rushing down the river. John Zimmerman was up at his homestead 4 miles up, and he knew he needed to warn the town of Old Poudre City. He got on his horse and rode lickety-split 4 miles, and when he got to the town of Poudre City, he warned everyone. It was a town of about 50 residents, and they all got to higher ground. The only fatality was his horse that dropped dead as soon as he got there. But everybody got out safe. Every building was washed away with the exception of John McNabb's cabin and the chimney of the stamp mill. It still stands, it's protected. It's on the plot of where Old Poudre City was, on that land. But anyway, that's kind of a small sample of what happened to the town of Poudre City. John Zimmerman then, his next venture, if you can't see this mountain real well, but again, this mountain was just on the river where his third homestead was, so just below the fish ponds. John Zimmerman decided he was going to build a bridge across the river, and at the base of these beautiful crag stone mountains, he built the Zimmerman Hotel, or the Keystone Hotel, which truly was a monument to the Poudre Canyon. It took 6 years to not only excavate the basement, but then to fire all the bricks. And if you know where you're looking, when you go up the canyon, you can see the clay where the clay was mined. But they had their own furnace and made all the bricks to build this beautiful old hotel. There was quite an advertisement of the Keystone Hotel. It had hot and cold running water. It opened in the 1990. And
1900.
Oh, thank you. Holy cow. 1990, yeah. I do the names, Sue does the numbers. So we make a really good team. It opened in 1990, and 1990. Oh, holy cow. I'm going to quit now. One of the problems is I just had cataract surgery in both eyes, so I'm not seeing real well either. So
That shouldn't affect your brain, Sandy.
but it does when I can't see my notes. So thank you for giving me a little bit of grace. The hotel opened in 1900, and again, think about the fact that the only way to get there was by horse and buggy down Pingree Hill, which I'm going to call it Pingree Hill so you all know, and then up to the Zimmerman Hotel. And people came and would usually stay about a month because it took so long to get there. And it really was quite very, very impressive hotel. And as time went by, of course, John Zimmerman passed away. His wife passed away the year after the hotel was born. A lot of the was opened. A lot of the responsibility fell on John Zimmerman's two daughters, Ada and Aggie. And then if you recall, then of course we have the Depression, and we have the canyon opening up, and so stays became less and less and less, and Aggie could not run the hotel by herself. And so she made a deal with the Game and Fish to maybe sell it as a school for game wardens. Well, there's another story behind that, which we don't have time to tell today, but the bottom line, in the summer of 1946, the hotel was bulldozed into the basement, which is very sad because it would still be standing today. And again, there's quite a story behind all of that. But the piano for the Zimmerman Hotel, the Keystone Hotel, is at the Avery House in Fort Collins.
All right, in 1889, around the same time that John Zimmerman was beginning work on his stamp mill, a young 17-year-old Englishman named Norman Fry arrived at the Poudre Canyon at Sheep Gulch Ranch. Sheep Gulch Ranch was situated across the river just below where the chapel now stands, so just kind of over the ridge to the south. This slide shows Sheep Gulch Ranch about 5 years after Norman Fry arrived in the canyon, and that's my great-great-uncle, A.W. Scott, who had acquired the homestead in a series of tax sales and renamed it Pinehurst.
Do you want me to do that for you?
Sure.
Which one is it?
It's that one.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide.
Oh, yeah. The property was originally homesteaded in 1885 by a man named John D. Cooper, and he built the original log cabin and this barn. He sold the property to Eustace Dixon and Reginald de Rivas, who were in 1887. Now, these were two young Englishmen who were remittance men, and if you don't know what remittance men were, they were the younger sons of English nobility or wealthy families. The oldest son would usually inherit the property in England. the next son would go into the military, and any sons after were on their own, basically. And so a lot of them, what did the US and Canada and Australia have a lot of? We had a lot of land. And so they would send their young sons out to seek their fortune in these western areas, and they would give them either a monthly or a yearly remittance, often in hopes that they never returned. And there actually were quite a few remittance men up in the Livermore area as well. Okay. DeRivas and Dixon, in a series of tax sales, because they had borrowed money from someone, lost their property, and it was redeemed by my great-great-uncle in 1893. So that's my grandpa as a little boy sitting on the top of the steps there, Earl Abbott. A.W. was a successful businessman in Fort Collins, and he owned a drugstore, and he was actually involved in a lot of the early days of Fort Collins. His wife, Anna Maxwell Scott, known to us as Auntie Scott, I mean, I never really knew her. She was dead before I was born, but we still called her Auntie Scott. She renamed the ranch Pinehurst, and they entertained many guests at their summer cottage, as they called it. There was fishing, riding, card games, and dinner parties were favorite pastimes. My dad remembered it as a very elegant home with silver, fine china, bed ruffles, and a tea tray. A.W. and Annie Scott improved the house, closing in the front porch. This was the front porch. Adding bedrooms and an upstairs. There was even a croquet field, swings, and a children's play area. It didn't look quite this pristine when I was growing up there, let me tell you. There was 4 girls in my family, and it looked a little rougher. Next. So we spent much of the 50s and 60s at Pinehurst, and as I said in my introduction, we always considered it home. My mom wrote the following about, this was the dining room, and this table was supposedly made by Norman Fry, who I'm going to tell you a little bit more about here in a second. But my mom wrote this about living up the canyon. We made our own fun, of course, card games, charades, picnics, hikes in the winter, ice skating on the river. There was a lot of visiting back and forth. We never knew how many would be at our table for a meal. It could seat 14, and often did. The Poudre was special. We were only a small group of families, 4 of those families with children of the same age. Our lives overlapped in so many ways. It was a supportive community. We often traded kids. Sandy and I definitely went back and forth. No, that's okay. As the kids got older, Arrowhead provided job training and employment, not to mention entertainment like movies and volleyball. Sandy's mom, Lola, bore the brunt of 4-H instruction, but the rest of us helped when we could. Thanks to the Blisses, the Cases, and Vacation Bible School and Sunday School, our kids got a good foundation in Christian education. There may have been frictions between the families. If so, we were oblivious to them. I think our friends and neighbors were pretty non-judgmental, not blind to people's faults, but accepting each other, warts and all. Okay. So now we're going to talk about Norman Fry. So Norman Fry was a young Englishman who arrived at Sheep Gulch Ranch in 1889, and he's shown here with his very first horse, Nellie. Eustace Dixon, one of the remittance men, his family knew Norman's family back in England, and they agreed to take on 17-year-old Norman Fry for 6 months and $100, and they were going to teach him everything they knew about ranching. Well, it didn't take Norman very long to figure out that he knew more, at least as much, if not more than they did. In fact, it was rumored that Eustace Dixon spent quite a bit of his time up in the Livermore area drinking bad whiskey and playing cards. So they weren't really applying themselves very well. So Norman, over the next 10 years, learned how to chop firewood, milk cows, ran a mail route. He hauled lumber, he honed his carpentry skills, and he learned about the cattle business from various canyon inhabitants. So in 1899, 10 years after his arrival in the canyon, Norman homesteaded property west of Sheep Gulch Ranch and named it Twin Pines. He first built a small log cabin and then slowly improved upon the property. So the log cabin there on the right was the original homestead cabin that he built. Next. In 1904, Norman married Maud Ogden from Denver. They had met earlier when she was visiting friends up the canyon, and their 6-year courtship consisted of a weekly letter and a 2-week visit every summer. Maud agreed to marry Norman, but with the understanding that she'd give it a year, and if she didn't like it, she was going back to Denver. Well, evidently she liked it just fine, and their homestead eventually included a blacksmith shop. This was the blacksmith shop. The granary is up on the top right. A chicken coop, horse barn, milking barn, and the root cellar to store the harvest from their 1-acre garden. They entertained frequently and were truly the social hub of the canyon during that time. In 1915, they sold Twin Pines so that their 2 young daughters could attend school in Denver, as there was no school in the canyon at that time. They left the canyon, but retained a small piece of land to the east of Pinehurst and along the riverbank, where they built a retirement home that they named Fairkites, after Norman Fry's ancestral home in England. Norman and Maud enjoyed the later years and built a small guest cottage to accommodate visitors, which they named Duck Inn. Rumor has it that of 60 couples, only 2 ended in divorce, so it's been called the honeymoon cabin. Norman and Maud's ashes, along with those of other family members and pets, are in, I think there's another slide. Yeah, are interred at the shrine on the Fairkites property. So this is the shrine where all their ashes are interred.
Is that it? Arrowhead Lodge is where I grew up, born and raised. But to go back in time just a little bit, in 1929, the plat of land, oh, Sue.
Oh, sorry. I was shuffling papers.
Yeah, well, hello.
Well, they wanted to see these pictures again.
Yes, they did.
So rerun.
Yeah, there you go.
There, okay. In 1929, the plat of land was registered by the state and auctioned off, and there was 160 acres. It was purchased by the Bradford family. Next slide, Sue. This is Peg Bradford and her son Marion. Go back just a tiny bit, Sue. The lodge was constructed over a 3-year time period. It was constructed from logs that came from a sawmill up near Chambers Lake. And if you notice, the chimney on the fireplace, this lodge opened the summer of 36, and the chimney's not quite done yet, if you notice. Also, this little cabin back here isn't quite done yet. And the lodge was opened with a general store, which was on this side, and a lodge, which was open on that side. It was also opened with 5 cabins. And the Bradfords named it Arrowhead Lodge because right across the street and the river from Arrowhead is a big mountain, and the top of the mountain looks like the point, it's a rock point, and it looks like the point of an arrowhead. And it was one of the stage landmarks named Arrowhead Peak, and so the Bradfords named Arrowhead because it sat right at the base of that peak. And it opened with 5 cabins, and all of the cabins had Indian names. This was a picture of the lodge when it when it first opened. Next slide. Whoops, back up one. Sorry. After the 5 cabins, the Bradfords ended up building 7 more cabins, all with Indian names. And through this door, they built a game room and added on to the lodge with a game room. Next slide. In 1946, my mom and dad, who, I'll back up just a tiny bit, my father went to Fort Collins High School, and he was in the DeMolay. And the head of the DeMolay brothers was Mr. Bradford. So my dad had come to Arrowhead Lodge as a student at both Fort Collins High School and then again as a student from CSU. So Dad had a lot of love already for Arrowhead Lodge. And after Dad graduated from CSU, went into the war, was stationed at the Pentagon. He and Mom and Dad were married. They were back east, and they decided they didn't want to raise a family back east. And so they came back to Fort Collins, and they went and visited the Bradfords, and Dad said, you know, we'd really like to buy Arrowhead Lodge. And Mr. Bradford says, well, how do you know it's for sale? Dad says, we don't. And he said, well, we decided to sell last night. And so Mom and Dad, this was their first winter at Arrowhead Lodge in 1946, and then shortly thereafter that in the summer. This is a picture of Mom and Dad and their 3 daughters that they raised at Arrowhead Lodge. Mom and Dad ended up adding to the lodge a dining room and a kitchen and a walk-in refrigerator freezer and 1 more cabin. And Mom and Dad owned it, or operated it until 1986 was the last summer of operation. I think Dad would have, well, I know Dad would have wanted one of his 3 girls to continue operating the lodge, but it would have been a very costly event. Number 1, it was very seasonal, and number 2, to put the kitchen just up to code would have probably been at that time about $100,000. And all 3 of our husbands at that point had other careers. So Dad started on a journey with the Forest Service, and it was a 7-year process because the Forest Service cannot buy or sell property. So he did a trade, and there was a ski resort in Granby that wanted to expand their ski resort, and they were surrounded by Forest Service land. So Dad worked with the ski resort to purchase property and then sell it or trade it with the Forest Service. So the Forest Service had the lodge and the ski resort had their property expand. And by the grace of God, the community really took it into their own hands after the Forest Service owned it, and they did the work to put the lodge on the National Historic Registry, which we were very thankful for because it would have been a campground. So we're very thankful. It continues to operate as the visitor center for the Roosevelt National Forest, and you can stop there. They have volunteers every summer, and we're very thankful that the lodge is still open. And there it is as the visitor center by the Forest Service. Okay. Now we're going to go back in time again and talk a little bit about the road opening up to the canyon. This is the Baldwin Tunnel. It's not called that anymore, but it's the tunnel just above Mishawaka. And the tunnel, the first car through the Baldwin Tunnel was 1916. And in fact, that's my grandmother and my father. No, that's Stu. Dad's in the car. That's Stu. So the first car goes through the Baldwin Tunnel in 1916. It then took the convicts 4 more years to eke out the road through the Narrows. And if you know what you're looking at, you know exactly where in the Narrows that is. But the convicts eked the road out, and it took 4 years to then come to the junction where the road came down from Pingree Hill at
Pingree Park.
No, Pingree Hill, where Rustic is. Okay. So when the road opened up, and the long story, which we won't go into tonight, Colorado State University acquired land from the federal government that was situated up where the Pingree Park Mountain Campus is. And so a road was surveyed down into the canyon, and the Forest Service built a 3-span bridge, and this bridge was located just about 1/8 of a mile above the big silver bridge that goes up to Pingree Park. So that's where this old picture was. And there was a couple called the Eggers, and they thought, goodness gracious, there's 3 roads that come together. We need to put a town of Eggers right there. So they got a 100-year lease from the Forest Service and started the little town of Eggers, Colorado. There's a picture of the post office and the general store and a gas pump, and there were about 4 residents. If you know where you're looking on the sign, as you go up the canyon, there's a sign that says Eggers Fishing Pull Out. Well, Eggers, Colorado is on the other side of that, and if you know where you're looking, you can still see some of the old foundations. Well, the Eggers had 3 sons, and they needed a school. And so they decided we better build a one-room log cabin school, and that school was built also by logs that came down from the sawmill up by Chambers Lake, and it was a WPA project. And the school opened up in 1937 with 33. Sorry, thank you, Sue. Next slide. Where's the slide of the 17 kids?
We don't have it in.
We don't have it. The next year, though, it opened in 33. In 35, there was a class of 15 students, and I have a picture of it, but I don't think we put it in there. But all in that little one-room school. Next slide. So this is the class of 1952. Eggers closed for a small time after the Depression and
after the war.
And after the war, families started moving back into the canyon, and there was a need for the school to reopen. So it did. This is the class of 1952, and this is the class of 1959, which was the last year Eggers was in session. My sisters and oh, you don't.
That's Sandy.
My sisters and I all went to the one-room log cabin school at Eggers. It was a wonderful, wonderful privilege and opportunity to go to that one-room log cabin school. Mrs. Straight is the teacher on the far side. There were only 3 teachers, and Mrs. Straight was the 3rd teacher. The school then closed permanently after Poudre School District reorganized in 1959, and the community built a new school in partnership with the Poudre School District. And the Forest Service said, if you all as a community don't want this little building, we're going to tear it down. And the community said, we absolutely want this building. And so we moved it from Eggers, Colorado, up to the land where the church and the community building are. And it still operates today as this is pictures of the inside of it. It still operates today kind of as a little museum. It was at one time a library. Sue's sister was a librarian there for a while, but is now open when we have community events, and it's of course open on the days that we do the tours and we take people through the one-room log cabin school. This is also a picture of the curtain that was only down at Christmas time for the Christmas program. And as you can see, there's quite a history to these old curtains. Do you want to just say a quick history, Sue?
I should let Ken do it because he's the one who wrote an article about it.
You want to tell me?
It was a Loveland business that made these curtains, and they would mock up a small sample, take it around to all the businesses, sell the spots, and then once they had sold all the spots, then they'd get a big piece of canvas, and they had an artist who painted the pictures. The ads that were close to the pictures were pricier, but once they filled them out, then they would print it on these big canvas sheets. And it was granges, community buildings, schools mainly that used them. And that Loveland business was in business till the 50s. Right, Ken?
Mm-hmm. And
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. The curtain is in really, really good shape. We don't put it down very often. We keep it rolled up, but like I said again, it was down at Christmas time for the Christmas programs. Also on the site where the old Poudre City stamp mill is, and the one-room log cabin school in the community building stands the Poudre Canyon Chapel. And there's quite a history to this building, but in essence, the community got together in Eggers, Colorado, or Eggers School, and had quite a discussion about needing a Sunday school and needing to think about, should we build a church or should we build a community building? And the community took a vote, and it won by one vote to build a chapel. So we started work on the chapel in the summer of '53. Well, I'll just go back a tiny bit because this is an important piece of history. There was quite a discussion about where to build the church. And there were two locations. One was this gorgeous site, that flat of land that had nothing on it. And the other was maybe a possibility of land up towards the game or the fish hatchery. And so they decided to build it on this flat of land, and they thought it was owned by the Forest Service. But after a survey, it was discovered that it was owned by the Abbott family.
So my father and my grandfather donated it to the community in memory of A.W. and Annie Scott.
And interestingly enough, in the original deed, it very specifically states that the chapel would be non-denominational, and if it ever became a Baptist church or a Lutheran church or a Methodist church, then it would revert back to the Abbott family.
And so I always say, yeah, we're just waiting. It's a very nice piece of property.
Also, there's just so many God stories in the building of this little church, but one Sunday, church was held at Arrowhead Lodge, and one Sunday after church, Dad made the announcement that the building committee would have a meeting after the church service, and this gentleman said, "My brother and I would like to stay for the building committee meeting. May we sit in?" And Dad says, "Sure, why not?" So they sat in and listened to all the plans to build the chapel, and all of a sudden this gentleman raised his hand and he said, "You know, I just have a question. Why would you build this church out of log in this gorgeous, gorgeous rock canyon?" And Dad said, "Well, because none of us know how to lay rock." And he said, "My brother and I are stonemasons, and we will come and teach you the rocks to gather, and we will teach you how to lay the stones." And they did, and it was just, a small portion of all the stories, but the community decided from the very beginning that there would be four things. Number one, it would be non-denominational, and that the first priority would be given to the Poudre Canyon community for their church services on Sunday mornings. The next was that there would never be a fundraiser to build this church. That if this church were to be built, the money would be provided through heartfelt desire to give, and that God would make it happen. And to this day, there's never been a fundraiser. There's been some amazing stories of where money came from, but there's never been a fundraiser. The next was that no one would get credit. There would be no one that would get credit. It would all be to the glory of God, and that there would be no names put on anything. It would be, if someone donated something, it would be recorded in a book, but not on a plate. And let's see, did I miss one? No.
I don't think so. I think the amazing part is that the entire chapel was built by the community.
The only thing that was hired out was roofers.
Yeah.
To put
which was a good thing.
Yeah, which was a really good
It's a
thing.
very steep roof.
Yeah. So church services began in 1959, and to this day we open Memorial Day weekend and close the end of September. There's a different pastor every Sunday. It's wonderful. We have the best of each pastor that comes. Church services at 10:45 every Sunday morning. We have a service on Christmas Eve, candlelight service on Christmas Eve, and Easter morning service. We have concerts. We have a quilt show. We'll be there at a big fun day at the community this
August 8th.
August 8th. And we have retreats. People have retreats. We also have memorial services in the late, next slide, in the late 1980s, about 1987, there was a need to build a columbarium. And so there is a columbarium on the west end of the chapel. You do not have to be a member of the Poudre Canyon Chapel to be buried there. You just have to have loved the Poudre Canyon. So we have quite a few people that are buried there.
And also on the side is Fire Station number 2 and Community Building. It's one big building. The Community Building is on the right side there. It was completed in 2010 and was a joint effort between the Poudre Canyon Fire Protection District, the community, and Old Poudre City, because Old Poudre City owns the land on which this is built. And then in 2020 we had the Cameron Peak fire, and it was a devastating thing for the community. We almost lost Arrowhead Lodge. That's the fire behind Arrowhead Lodge that night. We almost lost the school. They wrapped it in federal firefighters wrapped it in tinfoil, a little bit heavier than tinfoil, but to try to save it because we almost lost it twice, but we saved it. And sadly, we did not save Pinehurst or Twin Pines. They both were lost in the Cameron Peak fire on Labor Day, September 7th, 2020. Miraculously, though, Farrakhites and Duck Inn survived, even though the flames actually came up to the doorstep. And you can see the remnants of the burnt gate on Duck Inn. It burned clear up. It just burnt so close and then just stopped. And whoever, we'll never know why. But we're very, very thankful to still have that little piece of Norman and Maud Fry. So the stone gate into Pinehurst, and if you're driving up the Poudre Canyon, right before you get to the chapel, you'll see a bridge, and it's Norman Fry Drive is the name of the road. And if you look across the bridge, this stone gate is the entryway to my family's property. So the stone gate to Pinehurst survived, and the Scott name is still welcoming all who pass through, reminding us that although the buildings may be gone, the history and memories will always remain.
This concludes our presentation, but if you have any questions, we would be happy to ask questions. We kind of flew through this history. Like I said, it is a summary of an all-day tour that we take people on.
Yes, in regard to the Cameron Peak fire, was a cause ever established or how started?
The cause we have been told was man-made, was man-started, but there has been no charges to anyone, and I think the investigation is ongoing, but who do you know? They know that there were not any lightning strikes in that area that day, and they have determined that it was man-made, man-caused.
Okay.
Yes.
They give a great tour. One of the best tours I've ever had.
Oh, thank you,
Ken, thank you very much. That's really kind of you. And what's great, every time we do this tour, and when Ken Jessen went with us, we learn so much from all of you that go on the tour, because people say, I came to Arrowhead Lodge and this is what I know. Or there was a Woodward governor in that water wheel that brought electricity up to Rustic, and we always learn from all of you.
Ken's the one who taught us about Eleanor's.
Yes, he did.
There is a hike up there called Montgomery Pass.
Yes?
And apparently there was a gentleman named Montgomery who settled there. Do you know much about him? Or?
I don't know much about Montgomery. Do
I
you?
don't
Sue?
know.
Do you, Ken?
No,
No, I don't.
I could make it up.
Would you please?
We could too.
You just put something out there for us, would you? Oh, also, those of you who've been to Lake Agnes,
Oh, yeah.
that was named after Aggie Zimmerman.
Oh,
Yep. Yep.
how about Chambers Lake? How did that get named?
That was named after a gentleman, his last name was Chambers, and he was actually killed by some Indians that came through, and I think they killed him, and I think his son escaped, but he was killed by him.
Okay.
I think he was running, he might have had the original sawmill up there, I'm not sure. But there was a sawmill up at Chambers Lake for a long time. Yeah.
One time I was on a hike at Eagle's Nest and near town of Livermore. And while we were on the hike, a horse rider came up. I guess he was a range rider taking care of the cattle. And he talked to us for a little bit, and he said that where we were at in Eagle's Nest, this area used to be the town of Livermore, but somehow got moved to its present location. Do you know
Well,
about that?
now I think the town of Livermore actually was where they have a community building that was built, I think, in the 50s, is there, and then you cross the creek, and there's the old post office is still there, and there's two white buildings, a post office and then a two-story house.
Yeah,
And that's where the
Livermore Hotel. That's
yeah,
Livermore.
and so that was the original Livermore, was it not?
It was always kind of spread out.
Yeah. So I don't think it was over by Eagle's Nest. But you know what? I could be wrong.
Well, he pointed to a spot in the prairie and said, this is where
This
it
was the original Livermore? Yeah,
Interesting.
Who knows?
maybe. Maybe.
We could pretend.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Boy, you know where Boy Scout Ranch is? That was actually called Ashley Grange, and it was one of those places where they took in remittance men and supposedly trained them to be ranchers and cattlemen. But the locals made a lot of fun of them. So,
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
The Eggers you spoke of, they had 3 sons.
Yes.
Do you know their names?
I don't know their names.
Was one Keith? Does that sound familiar?
that Koenig never mentioned their
No,
names, did he?
No,
Uh-uh.
because when the school opened, well, I don't know their names, but now you're going to force me to go do a little bit of research. Do you know Keith Eggers?
I did, yeah.
There's Eggers Electric Company.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah, I
there's
don't
any
think that-
connection to the Eggers Electric Company. No. We, when we had the school open as a museum in 2011, wasn't it?
Something like that.
A gentleman drove by and he stopped and he said, I went to school here in the first grade. And he said, but it wasn't here. It wasn't here. And we said, that's correct, it was not. So we asked him to write his memoirs, and I didn't bring a copy of it. We read that on the tour, but oh my gosh, it was priceless to hear his memoirs of going to school there in 19...
And what a teacher had to do back then.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and that was true when we went to school.
Yeah.
It was amazing what Mrs. Straight did. The most I remember being in school was 11, but it was always only just 2 in my grade. But
I think you mentioned you do a tour. Can you tell us more about that?
well, really quickly, we in April we decide on the dates of the tour for the following summer because we visit 2 old homesteads and we try to get the owners of the homesteads to agree on the dates that we do this because they graciously open up the homesteads. So then when we have a list of people that want to go, and what I do is just get in touch with all those people. We do is get in touch with all those people. We do a Friday, Saturday in June, a Friday, Saturday in July, and a Friday, Saturday in August. So the homesteaders only have to eke out one weekend instead of 2 different dates in the month. And then you get to choose what date is best for your calendar. We start at 9:15 in the morning. We meet at Glen Echo Resort, and our first history is right there where the toll road came down or the toll road went up. And
Where that toll booth was.
where that toll
Yeah.
booth was, that's where we start. And again, we do 11 different historic sites. You bring a sack lunch, it's $50, it goes to benefit Old Poudre City. You drive to each site, and We have a sack lunch at the community building, which is a great place to stop. And then we end at the Kinnickinnick Ranch. And we didn't do the history of the Kinnickinnick today, but if you going up the road, you've seen the Kinnickinnick store, which is just below Sleeping Elephant Campground. Well, the Kinnickinnick Ranch is just across the road from the Kinnickinnick store, and that's where we end. And it is a good tour. We think so.
How do you actually sign up for it?
Well, right here, I happen to have a sign-up sheet we will pass around. We need your name, if you receive texts, your cell phone number, and then your email. So it's right here. You may sign up. I'll put it right there. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for inviting
thank
us.
you.
Big thank you to Sue and Sandra for putting on a very informative and interesting program. Also want to recognize Danielle Breaker Brown, who helped set this up. Appreciate your efforts on the programs.